Resonance of Fate, or End of Eternity, if you're cool, has a terrible combat system that's complete garbage. I'm just kidding. It's pretty cool. I love it. I love it so much. However, its execution is kind of poor. You see, as you start the game off, you have access to everything that will ever be in the system, and it will never change as you play through the game. Now, you'll master these mechanics as you play through the game, as you would in most video games. So you're getting better and you're getting more out of the combat system, but that's still kind of off-putting when this is the first time you're playing this game, and thus the first time you're playing this combat system, because it's literally in no other game. Now, here's what I'm thinking. If they had started off with a very limited version of the combat and then expanded it as the game went on, that would make more sense. Because usually, you don't have your entire arsenal available to you at the start of a game. Like in Final Fantasy or Star Ocean, you don't start off with all your good skills. They get unlocked later. Now, there are some games where you do have your entire arsenal, but those are mostly action games, which favor your motor skills, and are not RPGs that revolve around stats. So here's how I think they probably could have done it. From the start, you should only be able to move your characters around the map and aim from a still position. It's not the most attractive way to play this game, but that's what will make the game much better later on and more rewarding once you start getting cool things. So for maybe the prologue or the opening chapter, get used to the way the characters move around the map and how they can bump into stuff and how enemies only seem to move when you move and they do move when you're aiming your gun, just to give you a feel for how things work. And the hero gauge will be there. Now, the hero gauge is more or less the real crux of the battle system. The game's more about using and replenishing that gauge to do stuff. But for now, your players will not be able to really do anything with it. They'll just notice that it goes down whenever they get hit. Of course, the game would have to be rebalanced to focus on enemies that are slower and are less aggressive and don't really get up in your face, in order to compensate for the fact that your characters can't move while aiming. I think the next move that should be unlocked is being able to send enemies airborne. To send enemies airborne, you shoot them repeatedly while you're on the ground, which is what you're going to be doing. And so that's obviously the next logical step. Then I think we would introduce being able to run using the hero gauge, in order to encourage players to get a feel for positioning characters in that way before using the triangle attack formation, which would be the next thing we reveal, the character's ultimate attack. Then I think maybe bonus shot would be next, since characters are mostly running. And then the next move would be being able to jump while running. Again, the early parts of the game would have to be rebalanced so that there's not a lot of obstacles you have to jump over. But of course, there'll be enemies that have certain weak points that you can only hit from certain angles or above. That way, when a player jumps and shoots at enemies and they realize, hey, I can hit weak points now that are above them. Those guys are way less annoying now. That just makes them feel good. And of course, after learning about jumping in the middle of a run and learning that it keeps you in the air longer so you can pull off more shots, you'll learn how to do knockdown attacks. And then there's finally critical condition, which... yeah, maybe come up with more ways to get out of it, because that shit brutal.